When you think of an astrologer, you might think of a person who tries to predict the future. Well, my next guest has been a professional astrologer for 30 years and says the last thing she does is try to be a fortune teller. What she does do is she tries to help people find the pathway to success in their lives. Leslie McQuirk is here with more on this. Good morning.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. We do appreciate it. Talk about astrology. I think when I think of astrology, not knowing much about it at all, I think of when you know you're a Scorpio, then that means you have these traits or these qualities. But for you, this has been a lifetime of studying this stuff.
Yes, 30 years, and basically I believe it's not fortune telling at all. As you said, it's an imprinting system, and it's a map of the sky that was above your head when you were born. And it basically is the same as the owner's manual in your car glove compartment. It's just a manual. It's an instruction manual of how to best operate your life. Most people don't realize that. They think it's more of a fortune telling thing. So when I look at someone's chart based on time of birth, place of birth, and date, it can tell me exactly what you're here to do and how best to have a smoother ride through life. And it's incredibly useful, and most people, as I said, think it's fortune telling.
Yeah, that is exactly what I thought it was.
Right.
Now, we're talking about something called Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, it used to be everybody would talk about sun signs. Now everyone's talking about Mercury retrograde. What that is, it happens 3 times a year for about 3 weeks. And it's when this planet Mercury actually appears to be going backwards in the sky, but it really isn't. And because Mercury rules communication, people think during that time you have to be careful traveling, and if anything having to do with communication might go a little funky. But it's actually a time to go into a slower mode. So again, the car metaphor, when we are driving a stick shift, if it goes into neutral, you have to go into neutral to get to another gear. That's the way people should look at Mercury retrograde. It's a time to reflect, renew, slow down. So it's not necessarily a negative time. People freak out about it and they think this is a terrible time to do anything. It just means slow down, reflect. You don't have to stop living your life.
Are we in the middle of this right now?
No, the next one isn't until September 17th, and it goes until October 7th.
Okay, let me ask you about this. There are some big personalities in the news lately.
Yes.
Everyone from Donald Trump to Caitlyn Jenner
Yes.
to Hillary Clinton. When you look at these big newsmakers, we just see somebody who's on TV and has a loud voice or perhaps a powerful voice. What do you see?
Well, what I look at is how they actually are set up. So Caitlyn Jenner, fascinating person. His or her male energy in the chart was unaspected when he was born, which means that it's larger than life and cannot be contained. That's why he could win the gold medal in the Olympics. But what's amazing is that Kris Jenner and Kim Kardashian also have the exact same thing. So I believe one of the reasons why Caitlyn is now Caitlyn is because he lived with a bunch of people who had this very rare thing just as he did. So it also, I think Kim helped him actually make that transition because her chart with his chart shows an incredible belief in him to be the other part of his chart that's powerful, which is his female energy as a giant transformational person. So I believe we're going to see Caitlyn do even as much as Bruce did in terms of achievement in the world.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about really quickly about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is fascinating. He has absolutely no earth in his chart, which is one of the 4 elements. There's fire, earth, air, and water. So earth actually rules money and the body. A lot of beauty queens have no earth, like Marilyn Monroe, Farrah Fawcett Majors, and Elizabeth Taylor. So here we have a guy who has tons of money, and he also owns all these beauty pageants. But sometimes he's not that grounded, because without earth, you sometimes forget to have, your place here on the planet. He also has an aspect in his chart about communication where he can be a little bit hard for people to understand. It's like talking under the water and everybody's on the pool deck and they don't really understand what he's saying. So he has to be careful. As we now know, he's saying a lot of things that people are reacting to in a very strong way. So if he was my client, I'd say you have to realize when you're communicating, you have to make sure you're really grounded and people need to be able to hear you.
Right. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the clients you have, sort of bring it back down to our level for a moment. How would you help somebody? When do they call you in for your expertise? And can you maybe tell us about a success story?
Sure. A lot of times people call me because they just want to know what they're here for, and if they're having a particular difficulty in their life. An astrologer can always tell you the way out. So one of the success stories I can tell you is a friend of mine. She and her husband were very type A, very fiery people. Their charts were filled with fire. And they had a son who was 16 years old, just sitting on the couch, not doing anything, and they were very frustrated. A lot of parents can get very frustrated with teenagers, and that's when I first saw an astrologer when I was 18, and she basically redirected my life. I think she actually saved my life.
Wow.
So in this particular case, this child, I looked at his chart, he was all water, which is very soft energy. So here he has these two parents who are go,
Fire.
go, go. Yeah, exactly. So I said, you need to get him in the pool. He needs to be swimming because then he can do what he's best at in the water. He didn't start to swim until he was 16, and he's now one of the top swimmers in the state of Florida. And I can tell you that that family to this day, they didn't believe in astrology at all, but they now do because they saw what I could do to help this 16-year-old kid. So I now also work with a lot of psychotherapists. A lot of people who didn't understand what astrology was are now using me to help better direct people, and I feel that it saves people a lot of money in therapy time because I can pinpoint your wiring system and see whether or not you have a tendency towards depression or alcoholism or athleticism or whatever, but there's always something beautiful in a chart. And there is total free will. You're in charge of it, not the stars.
Well, that's very interesting. It's a completely different take. And when I have to be honest, when I found out I was talking to an astrologer today, I thought, okay, here we go.
Crystal balls and all that
we're going to
stuff,
talk
yeah.
about who's going to potentially win the presidential
I'm not
election
interested in that.
or something like that. No, and
No.
so this is a completely different
Yes.
take. I know you're working on a book, but what's your website?
LuckyStarsAstrology.com.
LuckyStarsAstrology.com.
yeah.
Leslie McQuirk, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in.
It's
We
great to be here.
appreciate your time this morning.
Thank
on
you.
Something New.